For today's video, we're going to be taking a spin on one of the couple of different ways that I've been playing Dreadway Ledros, or what I call Dreadros. And this is a combo that focuses on the new boat, the Dreadway, that fetches a gangplank, and then also Commander Ledros. So if you are not familiar with the combo, the Dreadway here says double all damage dealt by allies, and Commander Ledros' skill, his play effect, counts as coming from him, so that damage is in fact doubled. Now, because he deals half of the enemy nexus as his just base damage when you play the skill, if Dreadway is on the board, it will double the half to a whole and you one-shot the enemy. Now, there's a lot going on here. Obviously, this is more difficult to pull off than you might assume because, one, it's 2 9-cost cards, but also there's a lot of potential for disruption. So you can't just slap one down and then next turn slap the other one down, or at least you can't do it very often. A lot of times you have to play around deny or disruption effects. You know, if they remove the Dreadway while the other ability is on the stack, for example, then you just get the traditional Ledros trigger. And also, it's a late game combo, so you have to survive to get there. So we're going to go through this list. There's a couple of different ways you can play this deck. I actually have another version where I use the Spider package, and I use that to kind of take control of the early game and give you a secondary win condition. But this one is just more standard, straight up control centric. So Glimpse Beyond here is for card draw for pretty obvious reasons. If you're playing Shadow Isles, you usually include that card. I'm running Hired Gun. This is becoming very quickly one of my favorite 2-drops in the game. The 2/3 stat line is respectable, and giving something vulnerable is not as strong as just outright having Challenger, but it's pretty close. And I've, for the most part, fallen in love with this card. Make It Rain here is great alongside Vile Feast for early game disruption as well. Both of these also benefit from Gangplank's Keg if you want to pull that off. Currently still running Frenzied Skitterer. However, lately I've been making a strong consideration or a strong case to myself to potentially include, you know what, actually I don't think I own it yet, so we'll have to do the show unowned. But a potential replacement for Skitterer is Dreadway Deckhand. Now, Skitterer is still very strong, even post-nerf, and you do have cards like Vile Feast to get some benefit of the +1/+0. Really, it's a defensive card. And the reason I've been including it is just because it does still have 3 attacks, so it trades very well and it can block fearsome units. However, the reason Dreadway Deckhand here is potentially a better replacement is because of the Powder Keg. Now, Powder Keg has a lot of synergy with Make It Rain, with Vile Feast, with Grasp, and Withering Wail, so the Powder Kegs are not irrelevant. Because we're also running Glimpse Beyond, this technically provides 2 bodies that you can glimpse. So even if you do play this and then somebody tries to destroy the keg before you can get the chance to take advantage of it, you can then glimpse the keg, turn that into card draw. This is a great card at its cost to provide at least 1 keg later. And then if they try to interact with it, then you can play your spell in response. So I guess what I mean is in later turns, if you really want to say, for example, play Make It Rain for 2 or even Withering Wail, you know, 7 mana for you play this, and then once they initiate their action, being able to then also hit the Withering Wail for like a one-sided avalanche and you heal is pretty powerful. So what I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if this card ends up replacing Skitterer, and there's a strong case to be made there, so I would keep an eye on that. The next card in my list is also right now just kind of a placeholder. It's something I was experimenting with. Because this is a late game deck, you oftentimes need some interesting ways to interact with other late game decks, but also on the turns where you kind of have control of the board, you're looking for ways to like further put your enemy behind. And so I've been playing around with Sleight of Hand a lot. This is the closest thing to a discard spell that exists in the game. And it's a little bit, you know, sad that you can't hit champions, but I understand why. But essentially being able to play 3 to draw a card from your opponent's hand is almost like paying 3 to act as either removal or a response to whatever it is that you just drew. You're kind of preempting the strike. So if I have leftover mana, this has been kind of what I dump it into. I don't know if this is going to stay in the deck long term. It's also entirely possible that this becomes Dreadway deckhand and the Skitterer stays. But this has been interesting, to say the least. It is also a draw effect. Now, why does that matter? Well, because I'm running 3 copies of Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate is in here simply because of his flexibility. Great effect, gives you a body. Similarly, Zap Sprayfin is in here. Zap, to me, is the Bilgewater version of Shadow Assassin. Now, it's not 100% the same. Shadow Assassin comes down a turn earlier. Zap, however, is usually like a net 3 cost because of the attune. And while you're not just drawing any card, you are still drawing a card. So it does still help with Twisted Fate, and it does help you draw some of these spells that you may or may not want. Now, that's another reason why Sleight of Hand might end up coming out as well in favor of something like Dreadway, just because then that lowers the amount of cards potentially drawn by Zap, which means the consistency is increased. As I said before, right now, this is mostly for experimentation. But Zap is just, it's a great value card. So like I said, to me, this is like the Bilgewater version of Shadow Assassin. I've been running this in a lot of lists. One Gangplank, just because we're not like all in on his game plan, but making sure that the first time you play Dreadway, you also draw something is just kind of a nice thing to do. And also, because you're going to draw him with Dreadway, unless you absolutely need him, shuffling him back is a pretty easy decision. Now, what do you mean shuffle him back? Well, Twisted Fate here, if you've already got one on the board, then the second one becomes his pick a card. And pick a card isn't necessarily great in this deck because you very often can't take full advantage of the fleeting stuff. But being able to shuffle Gangplank or some of the other potentially dead cards in your deck and then getting more value is nice there. Now, we have Grasp and Withering Wail for, I think, pretty obvious reasons. This is a control deck. They help you gain health, etc., etc. And then I got a lot of like tech choices to round out the end of this list. Devourer of the Depths is a card I've been very fond of, even if you never trigger the Deep. Paying 6 for a 4/4 body that also potentially obliterates a key unit is pretty huge. And unless they have something that buffs them, this is one of the best ways to deal with Unyielding Spirit Fiora. And a lot of times people don't see this coming because if you're not in a Nautilus deck, they don't expect you to have this. But this has been fine as a one-of in a lot of lists for me, and I'm a fan. I'll put it that way. I also see a lot of potential, just as a heads up, even if you are not running deep-based decks, if you are ever running something that's control-based and you're combining Bilgewater alongside Freljord, so if you're building some sort of control-based Sejuani list, Devourer of the Depths goes up pretty substantially in value with things like Omen Hawk and the Avarosan Hearthguard. So what I'm saying is in the future, expect a list like that from me because it's something I've been toying around with, and I'm at the moment just sharing one list a day, but I've got a plethora of like cheeky things I've been playing around with. One Vengeance, again, tech choice. One Riptide Rex because this card is bananas. If, again, I was in a more Freljord / Bilgewater control-based list, this would easily be a 2. I think this card is hilariously good. I like it more than I like Rasa. And then the combo, right? 2 Ledros, 2 Dreadway. You're running 2 of each of these to increase your chances of drawing your finishers, and then also to deal with, in some ways, all of the steal cards from your deck cards, right? So like not just even Sleight of Hand, but all of the Bilgewater, hey, I'm taking something from your deck. You need to have backup. So this is 2 ofs, even though they're expensive. And then 2 Ruination is your panic button. So this is the list. Far from refined yet, as I said. This is questionable, and this is questionable. I do like Dreadway deckhand quite a bit, and that might end up making the cut. And then I might play around with like one other option in those slots. But for the most part, this is it. This is the core. So we're going to do what I always do now, and we're going to go play a game so you can kind of see the deck in action, get a feel for what it's trying to do. Okay, so this is a little bit interesting because I'm not sure I've seen Fiora paired with the scout kind of like based lists, but I'm not necessarily surprised by it either. Like, if you don't own MF, or if you just want to try to get more control of the board, or you want to toss out some extra attacks on Fiora, assuming you are still running the like Relentless Pursuit package, I think that's a fine way to do it. This will likely end up being a pretty significant test of our deck's abilities. So I assume they're going to play something pre-attack. Yeah, there it is. So we'll just go ahead and take the Skitterer. I was trying to decide whether I want to do this now or wait, because if we top deck something like Make It Rain, it becomes pretty significant, but I'd like to do it when they don't have a lot of buff options. I feel like if they would have had the Ranger's Resolve, they would have used it there like going into combat, so I feel pretty good about making that play. Alright, so we do have the combo. And the good news is, other than maybe like Purify, this particular deck shouldn't have many ways to do anything about it. We're gonna pass here and see what they play. We might end up playing a Grasp this turn. We might not. I go back and forth on like when you want to play these. Largely because you do want to take advantage of the drain, otherwise it's just a really expensive deal 3 damage. So like in that regard, to make sure you're getting full value, letting some go is usually somewhat relevant.
Nothing gets between me and my mark.
We'll find our enemies wherever they hide.
So the problem right now is that if we play Gangplank like I want to, they're just going to end up eating the keg. Do we care that much though? Because I think the answer might legitimately be no. If they eat the keg, then that's the same as, what, likely gaining 2 health? And we can always glimpse the keg anyway. So I think this is fine. And it gives us a sizable blocker for the rest of the board.
Still heart, steady aim.
Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and do this.
Valor! Just like hunting thresher geese.
Trying won't do any good.
I'm fine with sacrificing Gangplank for this.
Valor!
So, ironically, or I guess I should maybe say surprisingly, the keg has survived. We're gonna be extra greedy. I suspect that they're gonna play something here. With this, I suspect something else. There it is.
Nothing gets between me and my mark.
We'll find our enemies wherever they hide.
All right. We could do. So what's interesting here is that if we stun the strongest enemy, that's Quinn, but it also gets her within 1, so that Withering Wail could finish her off next turn, but I think
Gotta trust your instincts.
that instead getting rid of stuff now before Ranger's Resolve comes into play is potentially a better deal. So I think that's actually what we're gonna do.
Or played one.
It's a bit of a tough call,
People person.
right? The greed play is
You'll pay.
ensuring we get rid of stuff. And then
All or nothing.
see if they have a combat trick, but I suspect that this is a nice punch through. Make It Rain's a pretty good pickup for us.
The ocean charts our course.
Alright, so potentially a little bit greedy, but you want to do this, I think, here, because then that runs down
Son of a...
to just the 3, increasing the chances that Make It Rain targets these.
Scouting ahead.
Always forward. This is our way.
So this is hitting the 2-1 health
Return
options.
accuracy.
Just gonna take the spell mana with us.
Fresh is worth at least twice as much.
Okay, so we're probably not taking the spell mana with us. Yeah, I was gonna say they're gonna take this challenge, so TF will just turn into cards, but I think we're overall fine with that.
I'm out.
Another Ledros. But another TF is good. We're just gonna pass because again we kind of expect them to play something, and if they don't, then I'm fine with that. Yeah. We're actually fine with that.
Blood and guts, golden glory.
Alright. A couple of different ways we could tackle this. Could play this and just try to get the win next turn. Like, we could do it. Because, again, Purify is really the only thing we're worried about. And that likely blocks at least one. The safe play would be potentially trying to play around them by going, like, TF to nuke most of this, grasping something. And I think that's actually what we're going to end up doing.
I'm always up for a round or two.
I'd like to develop Dreadway on our turn and then pass it so that on their turn we just have to slap down the Ledros.
Better than eating.
It's also kind of nice because it means we can sleight of hand to take something and then save grasp as well.
Always forward.
Fine with taking the 2 here. Stole a Badger Bear. Alright, so in this instance, we just play this because we're fine with trading a 4-4 for a 4-4 instead of the grasp. We'll do this all day. All right, so again, what we're most worried about is something like
Pays their debts
Purify.
with blood.
Because at 8 health, these regions don't have a lot of options for disruption. So if they go with an open attack here, it's a little problematic, but then they also don't get the scout benefit. Alright, so they went for that. And then we go for it. We get in there. And that is game. So there you have it. That is the combo. Again, it's really just kind of like a control deck, and then you try to win with the combo. Yes, I know I'm still down here in Plat 4, but I've been doing a lot of experimentation. So climbing hasn't really been the focus. I've got some lists that I have definitely had like good progress with, but then I've got some lists that were not so good. So I do plan on sharing the good lists a bit later. Now, I will say this list, if you're looking for something that's fun, it's kind of got a cool combo. This is a climbable list. The win rate with this has certainly been positive. This is by far and away not the best list that I've played thus far. I think right now the best lists are, I mean, it's not going to be a shock, but Demacian based lists, whether it is Mono Demacia, whether it is the Bilgewater Demacia scout list. I've been playing around with a Ionia and Demacia's kind of scout with elusives list. Turns out Demacia was really good before this expansion, and then it got Badger Bear and Grizzled Ranger. So that's a really good region right now. You should definitely plan for running into that as you play. But I just wanted to reiterate, unlike yesterday's list, which is entirely all about fun, this list today, I think, has some legs, and I don't even think it's optimized. As I said before, I think that there's a couple of cards that I could buy an argument for subbing out, but this one is capable of climbing. It might not be the fastest climb, but you can steal some wins with this. So anyway, if you made it this far and you're still listening to me, thank you. I appreciate you, and hopefully I'll catch you watching more videos in the future.